My name is Daphne. I'm 28 years old. My entire family was laughing at me. In front of all my friends, in front of the neighbors, at my own graduation party. They were calling my art degree a worthless piece of paper. My Uncle Mark was pretending to draw caricatures for spare change while my Aunt Carol cackled so hard she was crying. I could feel the heat rising in my face, a wave of pure humiliation that made the world shrink down to this one single agonizing moment. For a second, I felt nothing but that bewildered kind of helplessness that makes you want to curl up and disappear. They saw my silence as weakness, my acceptance of their judgment, but it wasn't weakness. It was the calm before the storm. What they didn't know was that just that morning, while they were busy blowing up balloons for what felt like a public execution, I had quietly signed a contract to be a junior animator on a major film. And I was about to let them know. It feels like my entire life has been a silent competition I never even signed up for. In my family, there were two paths, the sensible one and the silly one. My path was, apparently, the silly one. The sensible path was paved, lit, and proudly walked by my cousin, Alex. He was only a year older than me, but in our family's eyes, he was a generation ahead in wisdom. Alex was studying business. That word was spoken with a kind of reverence at family gatherings. It was solid, respectable. It meant spreadsheets, suits, and a guaranteed climb up the corporate ladder. I, on the other hand, was the artist, the dreamer, the artsy-fartsy one, a label my Uncle Mark gave me when I was 10 and has used religiously ever since. My passion wasn't for numbers on a screen. It was for bringing characters to life. From the moment I could hold a crayon, I was drawing. My worlds were built with graphite and ink, and eventually animated on a second-hand tablet I'd saved up for months to buy. My bedroom wasn't a bedroom. It was a studio. The walls were covered in character sketches, storyboards, and anatomy studies. My nights were spent under the glow of my monitor, painstakingly crafting a walk cycle frame by frame. To my family, this wasn't dedication. It was a phase they were hoping I'd grow out of. At every Sunday dinner, the conversation was a masterclass in passive aggression. Alex would talk about his internship at some prestigious bank. He's already managing client portfolios, my Aunt Carol would say, beaming. They're talking about offering him a position before he even graduates. Then, all eyes would swivel to me. "And how are you, dear?" my mom would ask, her voice laced with that familiar, gentle anxiety. "Still drawing?" My dad would then chime in with his favorite bit of financial advice. "You know," he'd say, leaning back, "I calculated what you've spent on those fancy pens and software. We could have bought a decent used car with that money. Instead, it's just gone. It's like setting money on fire, but at least with fire, you get a little warmth." The laughter that followed was the worst part. It wasn't exactly malicious. It was worse. It was pitying. They saw my passion as a charming but tragic flaw, like a bird with a broken wing that would never leave the nest. They didn't see the hours of practice, the complex software I'd taught myself, the relentless drive to improve. They just saw a hobby. A cute, expensive, dead-end hobby. Aunt Carol, Alex's mom, was the lead prosecutor in the case against my future. Her favorite question, usually delivered with a deeply concerned sigh, was, "But honey, when are you going to get a real degree?" To her, my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Animation was the equivalent of a degree in underwater basket weaving. It was a joke, a 4-year, $50,000 a year punchline. Despite it all, I held onto a dream, a secret I kept locked away, a little flame I protected against the constant wind of their disapproval. That dream was Dreamweave Studios. They weren't just a company, they were the Valhalla of animation, an independent studio known for taking risks, pushing boundaries, and creating some of the most breathtakingly beautiful animated films of the last decade. To my family, a place like Dreamweave was as mythical as a dragon's hoard. To me, it was the only destination that mattered. It was the reason I put up with the sighs, the jokes, and the pity. It was the why behind every long night and every sacrificed weekend. I knew my work was good. I just had to prove it, not to them, but to myself. My senior year of college was when the family's gentle concern went into overdrive. With graduation looming, the theoretical problem of my useless degree was about to become a very real, unemployed crisis in their minds. The suggestions became more direct. You know, the community college has a great paralegal program, my dad offered one evening, sliding a pamphlet across the dinner table. It's only 2 years. You could do that while you draw on the side. My mother's approach was more panicked practicality. She'd leave job postings for administrative assistants on my bed. "Look, this one is at a nice insurance company," she'd say, her voice bright with forced optimism. "You're so organized with your art things. I'm sure you'd be a wonderful secretary." Aunt Carol, of course, was much more direct. "You need to face reality," she told me during my 22nd birthday dinner. "Alex already has 3 job offers, and he hasn't even written his final exams." 3. "And you? You're going to graduate with a portfolio of cartoons. You can't pay rent with cartoons." Every word was a small chip at my armor. It was exhausting. It was a constant battle to protect my own belief in myself from the people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters. So, I built a fortress of secrecy. While they planned my alternate future as a receptionist, I was executing my own plan in the dead of night. The application for Dreamweave Studios' junior animator program felt like an act of high treason. Their standards were notoriously high. They only took a handful of new artists each year from a global pool of thousands. My professors had been encouraging, telling me my portfolio was one of the strongest they'd seen in years. But against the backdrop of my family's doubt, their words felt like distant echoes. I remember the night I sent it. It was 3 a.m. I'd spent a month curating my reel, selecting only the absolute best pieces. A fluid character interaction, a complex effects animation, a short, emotional scene I'd poured my soul into. My finger hovered over the submit button for what felt like an eternity. With a deep breath, I clicked. I closed my laptop, a strange mix of terror and relief washing over me. The arrow was loosed. Now, all I could do was wait. A month went by, then 2. I'd almost given up. I started to let their voices creep in, whispering that maybe they were right, and then it happened. An email. The subject line was simple. Dreamweave Studios, animation applicant update. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it, my hands shaking. It was an invitation for a first-round interview. I didn't scream. I just sat there, reading the words over and over, a slow, spreading warmth of validation filling my chest. The interview process was a covert operation. I scheduled calls for times I knew no one would be home. I took a technical test that involved animating a complex scene in under 48 hours, a grueling marathon that left me exhausted but proud. My final interview was with the legendary art director, a woman whose work had inspired me since I was a kid. I was terrified, but we ended up talking for nearly 2 hours. Not just about technical skills, but about story, emotion, and the philosophy of why we create. I left that call feeling truly seen. I kept all of it a secret. It was my treasure, too precious to be exposed to their casual cynicism. If I failed, I didn't want their pity. And if I succeeded, well, I hadn't thought that far ahead. The offer came on a Thursday morning, the day before my graduation party. It was in another unassuming email. Offer of employment, Dreamweave Studios. I clicked it open, my breath caught in my throat, and there it was, in black and white. Position, junior animator. I'd have a lead role on a principal character for their next feature film, The Sunken City. It was a massive vote of confidence. And then I saw the number. Starting salary, a $105,000 per year. I read it once, twice, a third time. It didn't seem real. $105,000. While not unheard of for top-tier talent poached by major studios, it was an astronomical, life-changing amount of money. I learned later that Dreamweave had a new, aggressive recruitment strategy: identify the best university talent and make them massive offers to lock them in, before competitors could. They valued potential above all else, and they were willing to pay for it. I started laughing, a wild, unhinged, joyful laugh that was half sob. I had done it. Every late night, every snide comment, every moment of doubt, it had all led to this. I wasn't a joke. I was a professional artist. The contract was attached. I printed it, signed it, scanned it, and sent it back all within the hour. Done. I was officially an employee of Dreamweave Studios. I was moving to California in 2 weeks, and I had to get through my graduation party. The timing was so perfect, it felt scripted. The party, which my parents and aunt had insisted on throwing, was no longer just a celebration of my degree. In their minds, it was a gentle, public push out of the nest. A final, "We support you. Now go get a real job" rally. They had no idea I'd already flown. Holding this secret for the next 36 hours was going to be the hardest performance of my life. The party started off exactly as I'd expected. Our backyard was filled with chattering relatives and a handful of my actual friends, who were huddled together like a small, supportive island in a sea of familial judgment. For the first hour, I navigated the minefield of backhanded compliments. "Well, you finished. That's the important thing," one great-aunt said, patting my arm a little too forcefully. "That cap and gown looked lovely on you, dear," said another, as if the purpose of my degree was to be an accessory. My friends were my sanctuary. They hugged me, genuinely congratulated me, and talked excitedly about my thesis film. "You're going to be famous," my best friend, Maya, whispered. I just smiled, holding my colossal secret tight in my chest. It felt like a warm, glowing stone. Then, my father clinked a fork against a bottle. A toast to the graduate," he announced, a broad, performative smile on his face. My stomach clenched. Here we go, the main event. "We are all so proud of our girl," he began, and for a second, I wondered if I'd misjudged him. "She set her mind to something and saw it through. It was a long, expensive road," he continued, and there it was, the pivot. "Lots of supplies." He paused for the expected chuckle from the uncles. "And while we're all a bit curious to see what one does with a degree in drawing," he said, waving a hand dismissively, "we know you'll figure something out." He was just warming up. "Maybe the local coffee shop is hiring," he boomed. "I hear they like artsy types for the foam designs. You'd have a leg up." The laughter erupted. My friends looked mortified. My art history professor, Dr. Albright, who had stopped by, had a look of profound disappointment on his face. But they weren't done. Uncle Mark jumped in. "I've got it! You can go to the boardwalk and draw caricatures for $5 a pop." He puffed out his cheeks and crossed his eyes, imitating a cartoon. Then came the finishing blow. Aunt Carol put an arm around my shoulder, her touch like ice. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with pity, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't you listen to them? That piece of paper you got today, it's a lovely decoration for your wall. A truly beautiful, very, very expensive decoration." And that was it, the moment. My own family, pointing and laughing at my life's passion in front of my friends and my mentor. You read about public humiliation, how it creates this moment of shock where the world goes into slow motion. That's exactly what it was. The laughter became a distant buzz. I felt the blood drain from my face, then rush back with hot, prickly shame. For a split second, I wanted to run, to cry, to scream. But then, something else kicked in. Beneath the shock, a different kind of heat began to build. Not the flush of shame, but a cold, quiet rage. A perfect, diamond-hard fury. They thought they were burning me down. They had no idea they were just forging me into something stronger. I looked at their laughing faces, at my father's smug grin, my uncle's mockery, my aunt's victorious smirk. And I didn't see family. I saw strangers who had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The laughter eventually died down when they noticed I wasn't crying or running away. I just stood perfectly still, letting the silence stretch out until it became heavy and uncomfortable. I looked at each of them, my father, my uncle, my aunt, not with a glare, just a look. And for the first time, I think they saw I wasn't a little girl anymore. When I finally spoke, my voice was unnervingly calm. Quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Thank you," I said, a faint, wry smile on my lips. "Thank you all for your career advice. It's touching to know you've put so much thought into my future." My father's smile faltered. Aunt Carol's face tightened. This wasn't in their script. "I have to say," I continued, "the barista and caricature artist positions sound tempting. Genuinely. But I'm afraid I'll have to decline." I took a deliberate step away from my aunt's arm. "You see, it's funny you mentioned my plans. Because this morning, while you were all so busy preparing for my roast, I was a little busy myself." Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. All eyes were on me. I unlocked the screen, navigated to my email, and opened the PDF of my signed offer letter. The Dreamweave Studios logo was at the top, bold and unmistakable. I didn't say a word. I just turned the phone around, holding it up for my father, my aunt, and my uncle to see. I made sure the screen was angled so the salary line was clearly, undeniably visible. My father squinted, then leaned in closer. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the color drain from his face. Aunt Carol moved next to him, her confusion morphing into slack-jawed disbelief. Uncle Mark just stared, his mouth hanging open. The silence was absolute. After letting them stew for a solid 10 seconds, I put my phone back in my pocket. "I accepted a position as a junior animator at Dreamweave Studios," I announced, my voice still calm, but now infused with a steel they had never heard before. "My role gives me lead responsibilities on a principal character for their next feature film. The starting salary is $105,000 a year. My flight to California is in 2 weeks." I let the words hang in the air. $105,000. I looked directly at Aunt Carol. "So, while I appreciate your concern for my useless degree," I said, quoting her, "I think I'll be okay. This worthless piece of paper," I added, gesturing vaguely toward my diploma, "just bought me my dream." The shock on their faces was everything I had imagined. It wasn't just surprise, it was a complete system failure. Their entire worldview, their carefully constructed hierarchy of sensible Alex and silly me, had just been vaporized. My father looked like he'd been punched. Aunt Carol was pale, her lipsticked mouth a perfect O of horror. My cousin Alex, who had been smirking on the patio, looked like he was going to be sick. I didn't wait for them to recover. I didn't want apologies or explanations. I wanted to leave them stranded on the island of their own making. I turned my back on them and faced my friends, who were now grinning from ear to ear. "Okay," I said to them, my voice now warm and joyful. "The real party is at the Old Oak Tavern in 30 minutes. First round is on Dreamweave. My treat." And with that, I walked away. I walked past the barbecue, past the half-eaten potato salad, and straight through the gate without a single look back, leaving them in the deafening silence of my success. The celebration with my friends that night was one of the best of my life. Just genuine joy and excitement. We toasted to Dreamweave, to California, and to the priceless look on my family's faces. Professor Albright even joined us for a drink, raising his glass and saying, "To talent. It always finds a way." It felt like I was finally breathing fresh air after being trapped in a stuffy room for years. Of course, the fallout was immediate. My phone, which I'd put on silent, was a war zone. When I finally checked it around midnight, it was a timeline of my family's complete emotional meltdown. First, anger. A text from Aunt Carol. "How dare you embarrass us like that? You are an ungrateful, spiteful child." Then, confusion from my dad. "What was that? Where did this come from? You've been lying to us." Then, the attempt to reclaim the narrative, again from Aunt Carol. "I was only joking. We've always been your biggest supporters. You're just too sensitive. And finally, pleading. A string of missed calls from my mom, followed by a text. Please call me. Your father is so proud, he just doesn't know how to show it. We love you. I didn't respond that night. I needed space to set new boundaries, and I was going to take it. The power dynamic had shifted, and I wasn't about to give it back just because they were uncomfortable. 2 days later, I sent a single, concise text to a group chat with my parents, aunt, and uncle. I appreciate you reaching out. However, I will not tolerate being mocked and ridiculed by my own family. Your jokes have been hurtful for years. I need space. I will be in touch when I'm ready. The move to California was a rebirth. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. At Dreamweave, I wasn't the artsy-fartsy one. I was a peer, an artist whose skill was valued. The work was challenging, demanding, and more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. As I settled in, the calls from my family continued, but their tone had changed. They treated me with a strange deference, asking about my job with a faint interest I knew they didn't possess. The irony wasn't lost on me that the career they had mocked was now the only thing they wanted to talk about. A few months later, my mom gave me an update. Alex, the golden child, was struggling. The job market was tougher than he expected, and he was back at home, working a temp job and feeling a little lost. Aunt Carol was now quiet on the subject. There was no triumph in hearing this, only a sad, quiet irony. Their sure bet hadn't paid off, while their long shot had just won the Derby. I haven't gone home yet. Our relationship is a work in progress, conducted through sporadic, polite phone calls. I'm open to reconciliation, but it has to be built on a new foundation of respect. Respect that, sadly, it took a 6-figure contract to earn. That party was a painful, searing experience, but it was also a gift. It was the catalyst that forced me to choose my own worth over their approval. It was the moment I stopped being their punchline and started writing my own story. In the end, what I learned is that you can't let anyone, not even the people who are supposed to love you most, define your value. Your passion is not a flaw, and your dreams are not a joke, even if the rest of the world can't see the finish line. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to believe in yourself so fiercely that their disbelief becomes irrelevant. That humiliation was designed to put me in my place, but instead, it showed me my place was somewhere they could never have imagined. So, let me ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to prove someone wrong in a big, life-changing way? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for listening.